The taxi's hum faded as it pulled away from my Montford driveway, leaving me standing on the sidewalk, my coat damp from the drizzle. I'd just returned from a week visiting my sister in Colorado, my bones weary but my heart eager to sink into my favorite armchair with a cup of Folgers and a good book. At 68, Ellie Harper, Ellie to those who knew me best, had always found comfort in my Asheville home, a haven of memories built over 35 years. But as I looked at my 4 suitcases, neatly lined up on the wet pavement, a chill settled over me, deeper than the spring rain. A note was tucked under the handle of my largest bag, its sharp, slanted handwriting unmistakable. I picked it up, my hands trembling, and read, "If you want to stay here, we have the garage. Your loving daughter-in-law, Lauren." The words hit like a slap. Stealing my breath, I read them again, rain blurring the ink, hoping I'd misunderstood. I'd lived in this house since 1978 when my husband, William Will, and I built it. Our hands stained with paint, our hearts full of dreams. We'd raised our son, Benjamin Ben here, planted every dogwood in the yard, chosen every light fixture. After Will's death 2 years ago, I'd signed the house over to Ben and Lauren, legally, to help them with their growing family. But I was the one still paying the mortgage, $1,867 every month. A secret I kept to ease their burden. And now, this A note, casting me out to the garage like an unwanted guest. Rain pattered on my coat as I fumbled for my phone, my fingers numb. I dialed First Federal Bank, needing to hear it confirmed, to know I wasn't imagining this betrayal. Mrs. Harper, the representative, said, her voice crisp, "Yes, we show your automatic payment of $1,867 went through last Friday, as scheduled." "Thank you," I whispered, ending the call. A heavy drop of rain splashed on my cheek, mingling with the tears I hadn't realized were falling. The sky opened up then, as if giving me permission to break, and I stood there, 68 years old, staring at my life packed into suitcases on a Montford sidewalk. I should have seen it coming, the sideways glances when I mentioned repainting the kitchen, Lauren's not-so-subtle brochures for senior communities, the way they'd moved my armchair to the basement last Christmas, small cuts, each one deeper than I'd admitted, until I was bleeding out. The front door of my house stayed shut, its windows dark despite the afternoon light. I tried the knob, locked, then the key in my purse, useless. My breath hitched. A sob I swallowed down. The garage door was unlocked, and I stepped inside, the concrete cold under my shoes. A twin mattress leaned against one wall, a cheap nightstand and lamp beside it. My clothes hung on a portable rack. My books, photos, and keepsakes stacked in cardboard boxes labeled Mom's stuff in Lauren's sharp scrawl. I sank onto the mattress, the springs creaking, and stared through the small window at the house where I'd raised Ben, buried Will, and, it seemed, lost my place in the world. My phone buzzed, a text from Ben lighting up the screen. "Mom, we need the space. Lauren's been wanting a home office for months. The garage has everything you need. Don't make this difficult. Don't make this difficult." As if I were the problem, the burden. I thought of the nights I'd sat up with Ben during his asthma attacks. The second job I'd taken at a diner to pay his college tuition. The weekends I'd watch Sophie so Ben and Lauren could have date nights. I'd given everything my savings, my heart, my home, and now I was an inconvenience, relegated to a cold garage. I didn't reply. Instead, I dialed Clara Thompson, my oldest friend, my voice catching as I spoke. "Clara, it's me. I need a place to stay." "What's wrong?" "Ellie," she asked, her tone sharp with worry. "They've put me in the garage." I managed, the words tasting like ash. "Lauren left a note. My stuff's on the sidewalk. Clara didn't hesitate. I'm coming now, 20 minutes. As I waited, rain drumming on the garage roof, I looked at the boxes around me, Will's fishing lures, Sophie's finger paintings, my old accounting ledgers, my life, reduced to cardboard and tape. I curled my hands into fists, a spark of anger igniting beneath the hurt. This house was my heart, built with Will's sweat and my love, and they thought they could erase me. I wasn't just Ben's mother or Will's widow. I was Ellie Harper, and I was done being invisible. I stepped outside, the rain soaking my hair, and dragged my suitcases into the garage, shielding them from the downpour. I thought of 1978 when Will and I moved into this Montford cottage, its creaky floors and rose garden a canvas for our dreams. I was 32 then, a part-time accountant with a knack for painting. My evenings spent sketching the mountains. Will, 35, was a real estate dreamer, his hands always smudged with blueprints. We'd sit on the porch swing, sharing sweet tea, planning a life for Ben. This house will hold us forever. Will had said, his arm around me. I'd believed him, pouring my soul into every wall, every flower bed. I'd paid $1,867 a month to keep it standing, even after signing it over, thinking it was for Ben, for Sophie, for family. But family, I was learning, wasn't just love, it was respect, and that was gone. Clara's car pulled up, her headlights cutting through the rain. She stepped out, her silver hair tucked under a scarf, her eyes blazing. "Ellie, honey," she said, pulling me into a hug. "Let's get you out of this mess." I grabbed my smallest suitcase, leaving the rest for later, and climbed into her car. The warmth of the heater, a stark contrast to the chill in my bones. "They're selling the house," I said, my voice flat. Clara heard it at her book club. "They want a place in Oakwood Hills." Clara's hands tightened on the wheel. "They're selling your house, the one you're still paying for." I nodded, the weight of it settling deeper. I called the bank. The mortgage is still in my name. Technically, even if the title's theirs. Clara glanced at me, her jaw set. "Then we're not done fighting. Ellie, you're staying with me, and we're calling my nephew. Brian, he's a lawyer, specializes in elder rights. They can't do this. I'm not elderly," I said, a weak protest, but Clara's fierce look silenced me. "You're old enough to deserve respect," she said, "and they've forgotten who you are. We're going to remind them." We drove through Montford, its historic homes glowing under streetlights, the Blue Ridge Mountains a dark silhouette beyond. Asheville had changed since my youth, busier, brighter, but this neighborhood, with its dogwoods and creaky porches, was my constant. I thought of Will, his quiet strength, his love that had carried us through every storm. Ben's asthma, lean years, his cancer. He'd died in our bedroom. His hand in mine, whispering, "You're stronger than you know." Ellie, I hadn't believed him then. But now, with my life in boxes and rain soaking my coat, I felt a flicker of that strength, a spark I'd thought long gone. Clara's house, a cozy bungalow a few streets over, welcomed me with the scent of lavender and fresh bread. She led me to the spare room, its quilted bed a far cry from the garage mattress. "You're home for now," she said, setting my suitcase by the door. "We'll figure this out." I sank onto the bed, my hand still clutching the note. Its words burned into my mind. "Why? Clara," I whispered. "Why would they do this?" She sat beside me, her hand on mine. "Because they've forgotten what family means. But you haven't. Ellie, you're going to show them." I thought of Ben, my boy who'd once painted daisies for me, now a stranger under Lauren's sway. I thought of Sophie, her giggles in my garden, her small hand in mine. I loved them, always would. But love wasn't enough without respect. Robert's codicil, hinted at by Henry, was a shield I hadn't known I'd need a chance to reclaim my place, my home, my life. I didn't know what lay ahead Lauren's schemes, Ben's excuses, the whispers of Asheville's tight-knit community, but I trusted Will's words. The rain outside slowed to a patter, and I felt like one of those roses in my garden, battered but unbroken, ready to face whatever came next. If this story touches your heart, follow my journey to see how I found my strength again. Subscribe to my channel and comment below with the city you're watching from. I'd love to know how far my story travels. The morning after I found my suitcases on the Montford sidewalk, I woke to a quiet that felt like a stranger in Clara's spare bedroom, the soft creak of my own house, the hum of my kitchen coffee maker, the rustle of roses in my garden. They were gone, replaced by the unfamiliar stillness of a friend's home. At 68, Ellie Harper, Ellie to those who'd shared my joys and sorrows, had faced loss before, but none like this. Lauren's note: if you want to stay here. We have the garage lay crumpled on the nightstand, its words a wound that throbbed with every breath. Ben's text, urging me not to make this difficult, cut deeper still, a betrayal I couldn't unsee. I'd paid $1,867 a month to keep their house standing, a secret sacrifice for my son's family, and they'd repaid me by casting me out. I pulled on my robe, a faded flannel Will had given me for our 30th anniversary, and padded to Clara's kitchen. The scent of fresh-baked bread greeted me, a small comfort in the chaos. I brewed a pot of Folgers, the familiar hiss grounding me, and sat at her small table, its surface worn from years of shared coffee and stories. A vase of lavender from Clara's garden stood in the center, its petals soft against the morning light. I wrapped my hands around a chipped mug, its warmth seeping into my palms, and let my mind drift back to the years that had built me, to the sacrifices that had led me to this moment of exile. It was 1978, and Asheville was a sleepy mountain town, its air thick with pine and promise. Will and I had just bought our cottage in Montford, a fixer-upper with creaky floors and a rose garden we dreamed of reviving. I was 32, a part-time accountant with a knack for painting. My evenings spent sketching the Blue Ridge Mountains. Will, 35, was a real estate dreamer, his hands always dusted with blueprints. We'd spend evenings on our porch swing, sharing a pitcher of sweet tea, planning a life for our newborn son, Benjamin Ben. I'd paint while Will talked of building a legacy, his hazel eyes bright with hope. This house will be our forever. Ellie, he'd say, his arm around me. I believed him, pouring my heart into every detail: the yellow kitchen walls, the dogwood trees we planted, the nursery for Ben. Ben arrived in 1974, a bundle of joy, with Will's eyes and my stubborn streak. Life was a whirlwind of love and exhaustion. My accounting job paid the bills, but painting was my escape, a way to capture the fleeting beauty of our days. When Ben's asthma flared, I took a second job at a diner, working nights to cover his medical bills. Will's business grew, buying and selling properties across the Carolinas, but money was tight in those early years. I'd sit at our kitchen table, balancing the checkbook by lamplight, praying the numbers would stretch. They always did, because we were a team, Will and I, weathering every storm: lean years, late payments, the ache of losing my parents. I don't regret those days. Not really. Ben was my heart, and every missed painting session, every skipped dream, was for him. I wanted him to have what I hadn't a chance to chase his own path without worry. When he got into UNC Chapel Hill in 1992, I took a loan against the house to cover tuition, working extra freelance gigs to make ends meet. Will and I never spoke of the strain, but we felt it. A silent pact to give our boy everything. He'll make us proud, Will said. And he did. Graduating with an engineering degree, landing a tech job in Asheville, building a life I thought would include us. The coffee had gone cold in my mug. I traced a nick on Clara's table, remembering Ben's wedding in 2008, his grin wide as he danced with Lauren at a Biltmore Estate gala. I'd been hopeful then, dreaming of a daughter-in-law who'd share recipes, who'd sit with me on the porch, who'd love Ben as fiercely as I did. Lauren was 30, polished, a marketing consultant with a laugh that filled the room, but her charm was a veneer. At their first dinner in our home, her questions were too sharp about our savings, Will's properties, the house's value. Will squeezed my hand under the table. Our old signal trouble. She's after something, he said later, his voice low. I brushed it off, wanting Ben to be happy. He was 34, worried he'd never settle down. Lauren seemed smitten. And who was I to stand in his way? Their marriage changed Ben, slowly at first. He called less. Family dinners at our Montford cottage dwindled, then stopped. When they visited, Lauren always had an excuse to leave early. Ben's work, her events, Sophie's bedtime, birthdays were missed, holidays cancelled, always with apologies that rang hollow. I sent cards to Sophie, my granddaughter, filled with love and small gifts, but they often came back, marked, return to sender. I told myself Lauren was busy, that she'd warm up, but Will saw clearer. She's pushing you out, he said one night, his voice heavy, and Ben's letting her. Back in Clara's kitchen. I opened my purse, pulling out the crumpled note, its words stark in the morning light. I thought of Will's cancer, diagnosed in 2020. The first round of chemo was grueling, but hopeful. And he'd fought hard. Lauren's concern was polite but pointed, her questions circling money, our will, the house, his investments. When the cancer returned in 2021, fiercer than before, Will faced it with a calm I couldn't match. Ellie, he said one night in the hospital, his hand weak in mine, don't let them walk over you when I'm gone. I've made plans to protect you. I hadn't understood then, but the codicil Henry Walsh hinted at a legal shield against humiliation made it clear. He'd seen Lauren's greed, Ben's weakness, and acted to protect me. The first clear sign of trouble came 6 months after Will's death. Ben and Lauren had invited me to dinner at their Biltmore Forest home, a rare gesture that warmed me. They'd been attentive, asking about my garden, reminiscing about Will's fishing trips. Over peach cobbler, they'd eased into their real purpose. Mom, Ben had said, refilling my tea. Lauren and I are struggling with the house payments. Sophie's preschool, Lauren's business, it's a lot. That sounds hard. I'd said, unaware of the trap. We thought, Lauren had chimed in, her smile too bright. Since Will left you comfortable, you might help with the mortgage, just for a bit. I'd agreed, setting up automatic payments of $1,867, thinking it was for Ben, for Sophie, for family. But that was the beginning. A small request that grew into a pattern. My furniture migrated to the basement, my kitchen rearranged, my voice ignored. Lauren threw out Will's fishing gear, calling it clutter. Ben called me difficult when I objected, urging me to adapt. I'd shrunk myself, bit by bit, to avoid being a burden, paying their mortgage to buy my place in their lives. Clara's footsteps broke my reverie, her silver hair catching the light as she entered. You're up early, she said, pouring herself a coffee. Sleep okay? Barely, I admitted. Holding up Lauren's note, I keep thinking how I let this happen. Clara sat across from me, her eyes fierce. You didn't let anything happen. Ellie, you loved them, and they took advantage. That's on them. I sighed, the weight of her words settling deep. I paid 1 ton, $867 a month. Clara, for their house. And they're selling it for a place in Oakwood Hills. Clara's jaw tightened. I heard it at book club. Lauren was bragging, saying they'd upgrade once they sorted out the house. The truth stung, sharp and cold. I stood, walking to the window, looking out at Clara's garden, its lavender swaying in the breeze. I thought of 1978 when we planted our first roses. Will's hands in the dirt beside mine. They'll bloom every spring, he'd said, and they had, through every loss, Will's cancer. My solitude. Now this. I'd been like those roses, beautiful but yielding, bending to every demand. But roses had thorns, and I needed to find mine. I called Brian, Clara said, her voice pulling me back. He's coming over tonight to talk options. You've got rights. Ellie, that mortgage gives you a claim. I nodded, a spark of resolve flickering. I don't know what I'll do, but I can't let them erase me. Clara squeezed my hand. You won't. You're Ellie Harper, and this house, this family, it's yours. We're going to fight for it. I looked at the note, its words no longer a wound, but a challenge. I loved Ben, always would. But love wasn't enough without respect. Will's codicil, whatever it held, was his final gift, a chance to stand tall. The lavender outside swayed, its fragrance a quiet promise. I was ready to fight, not just for my house, but for the woman I'd forgotten I was. The days after I found my suitcases on the Montford sidewalk stretched into a quiet blur, each one heavier than the last. Clara's bungalow, with its lavender-scented rooms and creaky floors, was a refuge, but it wasn't home. My Montford cottage, where I'd lived for 35 years, felt like a dream I couldn't return to, its rose garden and yellow kitchen walls locked behind Lauren's cruel note. If you want to stay here, we have the garage. At 68, I, Eleanor Harper. Ellie, to those who'd known my heart, had faced loss before, but none like this, Ben's silence. His text urging me not to make this difficult, and the knowledge that I'd paid $1,867 a month to keep their house standing, only to be cast out. They carved a hollow in my chest, a loneliness I couldn't shake. I moved through my days on autopilot, brewing Folger's coffee I barely sipped, watering Clara's lavender plants when she was out. The tulips I'd brought from my garden, salvaged from a suitcase, had wilted in a vase on her kitchen table, their petals falling like silent tears. Outside, Asheville hummed with spring neighbors walked dogs down Montford's tree-lined streets. Dogwoods bloomed in soft whites, but inside, I was adrift, wrapped in a silence that felt like punishment. One morning, I checked Clara's mailbox, hoping for a letter from Sophie, my 6-year-old granddaughter, or even a sign from Ben. Among the bills was an envelope in my own handwriting, a card I'd sent Sophie for Valentine's Day. 3 months ago. Return to sender was scrawled across it in Lauren's sharp hand. Though my address hadn't changed, I opened it. My fingers unsteady. Inside was a note. To my sweet Sophie. Grandma loves you to the stars. Let's paint daisies soon. A $5 bill was tucked inside. Crisp and untouched. I stood on the porch, the May breeze cool against my face, and felt a fresh ache bloom. Lauren hadn't just pushed me out of my home. She'd stolen my bond with Sophie, one card at a time. Back in the kitchen, I set the card beside my journal, its pages a relic of the painter I'd been. I sank into a chair, the coffee cold in my mug, and stared at the card's glittery hearts. Had Sophie thought I'd forgotten her? Had Lauren told her I didn't care, just as she'd branded me a burden? The thought was a knife, twisting deep. I'd paid $1,867 a month for Ben's house, $45,000 over 2 years my savings drained to keep their Biltmore Forest life afloat. I'd babysat Sophie, cooked dinners, tended their garden, all to stay useful, to stay loved. And yet, I was the one left on the sidewalk. My love returned like an unwanted gift. In the stillness, I thought of Will, his hazel eyes steady even in his final days. I closed my eyes, imagining him at the table, his calloused hand on mine. What do I do? Well, I whispered, I've lost Ben. Maybe Sophie too. In my mind, he didn't answer, but his gaze seemed to echo the codicil Henry Walsh had hinted at. You're stronger than you know. Ellie, fight for yourself. I wanted to believe him, but the loneliness was a tide, pulling me under. That night, I dreamed of my rose garden, its blooms blackened under a storm, their thorns piercing my hands as I tried to save them. I woke with a gasp. Clara's guest room dark around me. The dream felt like a warning. If I clung to a family that didn't value me, I'd lose myself completely. But another voice, faint but growing, whispered back, what kind of grandmother am I if I let Lauren take Sophie from me? The next afternoon, I walked to the River Arts District, a vibrant pocket of Asheville where creativity spilled from every corner. The streets buzzed with color murals, danced across brick walls. Galleries glowed with soft light. I'd loved this place as a young accountant, sketching here on weekends, dreaming of art shows. Now, I wandered aimlessly, pausing outside a studio where a woman painted a river scene, her brushstrokes fluid and free. The canvas seemed to sing, and for a moment, I remembered the joy of a paintbrush in my hand, the way it felt to create something lasting. Could I find that again? Or was it too late for dreams at 68 as I walked home? The Blue Ridge Mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks softened by spring haze. Asheville had grown since my youth, its quirky charm polished by tourists and artists, but those mountains were my constant, a reminder of what endured. I passed a cafe on Hayward Street. Its windows steamed with warmth, and thought of my old art group, their encouragement as I shared my sketches. Don't let life steal your colors. Ellie, one had said, I'd let them fade anyway, but maybe they were still there, waiting to be reclaimed. Back at Clara's, I was pruning her lavender when I heard the patter of small feet. I looked up to see Sophie, her pigtails bouncing, running across the lawn, her backpack swinging. My heart leapt. Grandma, she cried, throwing her arms around me. I hugged her tight, breathing in her scent of crayons and sunshine, the world righting itself for a moment. Sophie, sweetheart, I said, kneeling to her level. What are you doing here? Her eyes, Ben's eyes, sparkled. I walked from school. Don't tell Mummy, I missed you. I glanced around, my stomach tightening. Sophie's school was nearby, but a 6-year-old walking alone was bold and dangerous. Does your daddy know? I asked, brushing a curl from her face. She shook her head, scuffing her sneakers on the path. They're fighting again. Mommy says you don't want to live with us anymore. Is that true? The words pierced me, sharp and cold. I guided her to the porch swing, settling her beside me. Come inside, honey, I said, my voice soft. Let's have some hot chocolate. In the kitchen, I warmed milk on Clara's stove, adding extra marshmallows, Sophie's favorite. The cocoa's sweet scent filled the air, a small comfort against the ache of her words. I set a mug in front of her, sitting across the table, the returned Valentine's card still there, a silent wound. What else did Mommy say? I asked gently, keeping my tone light. Sophie sipped her drink, marshmallows sticking to her lip. She said, you're keeping the house money, and we need it for a new house. Daddy says it's not your fault. But Mommy got mad. She looked up, her eyes searching mine. Why don't you come to my house anymore? Grandma, I miss painting with you. My throat tightened. Lauren's lies a weight I couldn't bear. I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. How do you explain betrayal to a child? I miss you too, sweetheart, I said, reaching for her hand. I'll always want to be with you. Your mommy and I. We're having a grown-up disagreement. It's not about you. Sophie nodded, her frown easing. Can we paint today, like we used to? Of course, I said, my voice thick. I glanced at the journal, open to a sketch I'd drawn of Sophie last year, her face bright with paint smudges. I wanted to be the grandmother she needed, not the one Lauren had erased. I called Ben to let him know Sophie was safe. His voice was strained, heavy with relief. I'll come get her, he said. I didn't know she left school. Let her stay a bit, I offered, watching Sophie trace the sketch, her fingers gentle. We're painting. I'll bring her home after. A pause, long and tense. Lauren won't like it. Ben said, his tone weary. She doesn't have to know, I replied, surprised by my own firmness. Sophie came to me. Ben, she's worried about you fighting all the time. Another pause. Okay, he said finally, but we need to talk when you drop her off. I hung up, my heart pounding. What would Ben say? An apology, another demand to clear out the garage. I looked at Sophie, pointing to the sketch. Can we paint this flower, Grandma? She asked, her voice full of wonder. Sure, honey, I said, ruffling her hair. We spent the afternoon with Clara's old watercolors, painting daisies on scrap paper, Sophie's giggles filling the house like music. She told me about school, her new kitten, her wish to visit my garden again. For those hours, I was Grandma again, not the woman exiled to a garage, not the mother whose son had turned away. But as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across Clara's garden, I felt the weight of Ben's visit looming. Would he defend Lauren? Ask me to forgive the note? Pretend nothing had changed? I stood at the sink, washing paintbrushes, the water warm against my hands. Outside, the lavender stood tall, its blooms swaying in the breeze. They'd weathered storms, their roots deep and unyielding. I needed to be like them, resilient, ready to protect what was mine, even if it meant facing my son's betrayal head-on. The air in Clara's Montford bungalow felt charged, like the stillness before a summer storm sweeps over Asheville's mountains. A week had passed since Sophie's surprise visit, her small voice echoing in my heart, asking why I didn't come to her house anymore. The rose garden I'd left behind at my cottage stood vivid in my mind, its blooms a quiet testament to resilience. At 68, Ellie Harper. Ellie, to those who'd shared my life's joys and sorrows, was no stranger to standing firm. But Lauren's note, if you want to stay here. We have the garage had shaken me. And Ben's text, urging me not to make this difficult, had cut deeper than any wound. I'd paid $1,867 a month to keep their house standing, a secret sacrifice for my son's family, only to be cast out. Today, at the lawyer's office, I'd face them, armed with a legal shield I hadn't known I had a right to claim the home I'd never stopped loving. The confrontation at Sophie's visit had been a spark, but the fire grew in the days that followed. Ben hadn't called to apologize, and Lauren's silence was louder than any argument. Instead, she'd posted on Facebook a cryptic jab about family holding on to what's not theirs, liked by her Biltmore Forest friends. The post stung, but it also clarified things Lauren saw me as an obstacle to her dreams, not a mother-in-law to respect. I'd given them $45,000 over 2 years, $1,867 a month for their mortgage, my savings drained to prop up their lavish life. Clara's nephew, Brian, a lawyer specializing in elder rights, had uncovered a legal lifeline and equitable lien, a claim on the house based on my payments. Even though the title was theirs, I hadn't decided to use it, not until I saw how far they'd go. The meeting was set for 2 o'clock at Brian's office in Pack Square, a historic heart of Asheville where old brick buildings stood firm against time. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple navy dress and the rose-patterned scarf Will had given me for our 40th anniversary. Its soft silk a reminder of his strength in me. Clara drove me, her hand steady on the wheel, her eyes fierce. "You ready, Ellie?" she asked as we parked. I nodded, clutching my purse, where I'd tucked Lauren's note and bank statements proving my payments. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I just want my home back." We stepped into Brian's office, a cozy space with bookshelves and a window overlooking the square's bustling cafes. Brian, in jeans and a blazer, greeted us, his sharp eyes softening as he shook my hand. "Mrs. Harper." "We've got a strong case," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Your payments establish a clear financial interest in the property. They can't sell without addressing that." I sat, my hands folded in my lap, the rose scarf soft against my neck. The clock ticked toward 2, each second a wait. When the door opened, Ben and Lauren entered, their faces a contrast, Ben's tense. Avoiding my gaze. Lauren's composed, her designer blazer crisp despite the spring warmth. She carried a sleek purse, her blonde hair pulled tight, as if armored for battle. Ben perched on the edge of his chair, his hazel eyes, Will's eyes, fixed on the floor. "Thank you for coming," Brian began, his tone formal. "We're here to discuss the property at 312 Willow Street, Montford, and Mrs. Harper's interest in it." Lauren's smile was tight, her voice smooth. "We appreciate the meeting, but I'm not sure there's much to discuss. The house is legally ours. Ellie signed it over 2 years ago." I met her eyes, her gaze cold as winter ice. "I signed it over to help you and Ben," I said, my voice calm but firm. "But I've been paying the mortgage $167 a month. $1,000 over 2 years. That's my money keeping a roof over your heads." Ben's head snapped up, his face paling. "You're still paying?" he asked, his voice low, as if the truth was dawning. Lauren's lips pursed, but she didn't flinch. "That was your choice." "Ellie, we never asked you to do that." "Choice," I repeated, my hands trembling now. "I did it to keep you from losing the house, to give Sophie a home. And you thanked me by putting my suitcases on the sidewalk, with a note saying I could live in the garage." Ben shifted, his hands clenching. "Mom, we needed the space. Lauren's business, her business." I cut in, my voice rising despite myself. "I've seen your lifestyle. Lauren, your Biltmore Forest parties, your new car, your boutique that's never turned a profit. I paid for it all, and you pushed me out, hid Sophie's cards, told her I didn't want to see her." Ben's eyes widened, flicking to Lauren. "Cards, what cards?" I pulled the Valentine's card from my purse. Its return to send a scrawl stark against the glittery hearts, and handed it to him. "This is one of many." I said, "I sent Sophie cards, gifts, love, and they came back." Lauren said I forgot her. "Ben," she lied. Ben opened the card, his fingers shaking as he read my note. His face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw the boy he'd been, painting daisies for me in our garden. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Lauren, you didn't tell me." Lauren waved a hand, dismissive. "Don't be dramatic. Ellie, you're blowing this out of proportion. Those cards were clutter, and Sophie's fine, she doesn't need you fussing over her." Something in me snapped, not with rage, but with clarity. I straightened, my voice steady. "Brian, tell them about the lien." Brian slid a document across the desk, his tone measured. "Based on Mrs. Harper's consistent mortgage payments, $45,000, since the title transfer, she has established an equitable lien on the property. This gives her a financial interest, meaning you cannot sell without addressing her claim." Lauren's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing. What does that mean? She demanded, snatching the paper. It means, Brian said calmly, you owe Mrs. Harper for her contributions, or the sale is blocked. Alternatively, you can sell the house to her for the remaining mortgage balance, approximately $150,000. Ben's face drained of color, his eyes darting to me. You're doing this. You're taking the house and protecting what's mine, I said, meeting his gaze. I built that house with your dad. Ben, 35 years of love, of memories, your first steps, our Christmases, his last breath. You don't get to sell it to strangers for a fancy place in Oakwood Hills. Lauren laughed. A brittle sound. This is absurd. The house is ours. Legally, you can't just, it's perfectly legal. Brian interrupted, his voice firm. And I have bank statements, witnesses, and records of your attempts to sell without informing Mrs. Harper. A court will see her payments as a contract, and your actions evicting her to the garage as exploitation. Ben's hands clenched, his voice shaking. Mom, you can't be serious. You're going to ruin us over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, I said, my voice low but fierce. You put my life in boxes. Ben, you let Lauren lie to Sophie, tell her I didn't care. You knew I was paying the mortgage, and you still pushed me out. That's not a misunderstanding, it's betrayal. Lauren stood, her chair scraping the floor. You're playing the victim. Ellie, we needed space for our family. You signed the house over willingly. You can't change your mind now. I didn't change my mind, I said, standing to face her, my hand steady now. I gave you that house out of love, but love doesn't mean letting you erase me. I've paid $45,000 to keep it standing, and I'm claiming what's mine. Ben's face contorted, a mix of anger and guilt. Dad would be ashamed of you, he said, his voice breaking, choosing a house over us. The words hit like a blow, but I held my ground. Your dad would be ashamed of you. Ben, I said softly, he built that house for us, for family, not for you to sell it out from under me. He saw this coming, and he made sure I'd have a way to fight. Lauren grabbed her purse, her movements sharp. We'll get our own lawyer, she spat. This isn't over. You're welcome to try, Brian said, unruffled, but legal proceedings take time, months, years. Your credit will suffer, and that Oakwood Hills house will go to someone else. Lauren's face flushed, her eyes darting to Ben. Say something, she hissed. We can't lose this. Ben didn't move. His eyes locked on mine, searching. I need to think, he said finally, his voice low. I didn't know about the cards. Mom, I didn't know. Lauren tugged his arm, her voice rising. Ben, let's go, now. He hesitated, then followed, but not before turning back. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice thick, and the door closed behind them. I sank into my chair, trembling not with fear, but with a fierce, unexpected strength. I'd stood my ground, protected Will's legacy, and given Ben a chance to see the truth. Clara squeezed my shoulder, her eyes bright with pride. You did it. Ellie, she said, you showed them who you are. Brian nodded, sacking his papers. We'll draft the offer to buy the house at the mortgage balance. If they refuse, we'll file the lien. Either way, you're in control now. I touched the rose scarf. Will's gift, feeling his presence beside me. The office was silent, the hum of Pack Square outside a distant murmur. I thought of Sophie, her small hand in mine, painting daisies. I thought of my garden, its roses waiting for me. I'd loved Ben, always would. But I was done bending. The note in my purse, Lauren's cruel dismissal, was no longer a wound, but a spark, igniting a fire I'd thought long extinguished. As we left the office, the spring air was soft, the mountains a gentle backdrop. I felt like one of those roses, battered by storms but standing tall, roots deep, ready to bloom again. Will had given me the tools to reclaim my home, my life, and I'd use them. Not just for me, but for Sophie, for the family we still had. The weeks after that charged meeting in Brian's office unfolded like a soft Asheville spring, gentle but full of life. Clara's bungalow, my temporary haven, began to feel less like a refuge and more like a stepping stone back to myself. The rose garden I'd left behind in my Montford cottage haunted my dreams, its blooms a quiet call to return. At 68, Ellie Harper. Ellie, to those who'd walked with me through decades of love and loss, was mending my heart. Lauren's cruel note, "If you want to stay here," we have the garage still stung in quiet moments, as did Ben's silence and the betrayal of being cast out. But I'd faced them, armed with an equitable lien, and reclaimed my right to the home I'd built with Will. Now it was time to tend my own soul, to see what might grow in the ashes of pain. I started small, as you do when rebuilding after a storm. One morning, I pulled an old sketchbook from my suitcase, its pages brittle but alive with the drawings I'd made years ago. As a young accountant, I'd dreamed of painting the Blue Ridge Mountains, capturing their fleeting light on canvas, life-raising Ben, supporting Will's real estate ventures, paying their mortgage had buried those dreams. But flipping through the sketchbook now, I found sketches of roses, Will's hands, Sophie's smile. I traced a drawing of my garden, my fingers hesitant, as if afraid to disturb the artist I'd been. Could I still paint? Or had years of giving stolen that spark on a whim? I walked to the River Arts District, a vibrant corner of Asheville where creativity pulsed like a heartbeat. The air smelled of river mist and turpentine, and the galleries glowed with color. I wandered into an art supply store, its shelves brimming with brushes, canvases, and tubes of watercolor. The clerk, a woman in her 60s with paint-flecked hands, smiled as I hesitated over a set of paints. "Starting something new?" she asked, her voice warm. "Picking up an old thread," I said, clutching the watercolors like a lifeline. "It's been a long time." She handed me the bag, her eyes kind. "The colors are still in you, honey. Just let them out." Back at Clara's, I set up a folding table by the guest room window, overlooking her lavender garden. My first painting was clumsy, the roses smudging into a muddy blur, but I laughed a sound that surprised me and kept going. Each stroke felt like a small act of courage, reclaiming the Ellie who'd once dreamed in hues of crimson and gold. The canvas didn't judge, it welcomed me, and that was enough. A flyer at the art store led me to a painting class at the River Arts District, held in a sunlit studio with exposed beams and the faint hum of the French Broad River outside. The teacher, Margaret, was a retired artist with a quick wit and a knack for seeing potential in every stroke. My classmates were a mix young creatives, retirees, a barista named Lucy who painted abstract swirls. I connected with Lucy, a widow whose humor hid a familiar ache. "Painting's my therapy," she told me over coffee after class, her laugh crinkling her eyes. "What's it for you?" "Ellie." I sipped my latte, the warmth spreading through me. "It's like finding a piece of myself I thought I'd lost," I said, and she nodded, understanding. The class became my haven. Twice weekly mornings filled with the soft scratch of brushes and Margaret's gentle nudges. "You've got an eye for light, Ellie," she said one day, studying my painting of my Montford roses, their petals soft but vivid. I blushed, unused to praise, but felt a quiet pride. I wasn't the young accountant with gallery dreams anymore, but I was creating. And that was a start. Clara, ever my cheerleader, pushed me further. "You need a job." "Ellie," she said one evening, Slicing apples for a pie, something to call your own while we sort out the house. I hesitated, my hands pausing on the pie dough. I haven't worked in years. Clara, who'd hire me at 68 Rosie's Cafe, she said, pointing to a help-wanted sign we'd seen in the River Arts District. You waitressed in college. You can do it again, the next day. I applied, my nerves jangling. Rosie, the owner, a no-nonsense woman with a grey braid, hired me on the spot. You've got a kind face, she said. That's half the job. My first shift was a blur, aching feet, spilled coffee, orders mixed up, but the tips in my apron pocket were mine, earned by my own hands. The simple joy of that, of being needed, was something I hadn't felt in years. One Saturday, my doorbell at Clara's rang, and I opened it to find Sophie, her pigtails bouncing, clutching a drawing. Ben stood behind her, his face softer than I'd seen since the lawyer's office, a grocery bag in his hands. Grandma Sophie cried, throwing her arms around me. My heart swelled, and I hugged her tight, breathing in her scent of crayons and joy. What's this? I asked, smiling at Ben as I ushered them inside. His presence, after weeks of silence, felt like a fragile bridge. I thought Sophie could visit, Ben said, his voice tentative, setting the bag on the counter. And we brought some things for dinner, if that's okay. I looked at him, seeing the boy who'd painted daisies for me, now a man grappling with his choices. Of course, I said, meeting his eyes. You're always welcome. We spent the afternoon in Clara's kitchen, baking oatmeal cookies with raisins, Sophie's favorite. She helped me roll the dough, her small hands eager, while Ben watched from the table, a mug of Folgers in his hands. This smells like our old kitchen, he said, his voice soft. You always baked when I was upset. You were upset a lot back then, I said, sliding a tray into the oven. Those asthma nights were hard. He nodded, his gaze distant. Sophie piped up, sprinkling raisins with glee. Grandma, can we paint after this? Like we did in your garden? I glanced at Ben, surprised. You told her about that. She found a painting you left at the house, he said, a faint smile tugging his lips. She thinks you're Van Gogh. I laughed, the sound light and free. After cookies. We set up my paints in Clara's backyard, the lavender glowing under the noon sun. Sophie painted a lopsided rose, her tongue peeking out in concentration, while Ben tried a mountain scene, his strokes awkward but earnest. I'm terrible at this, he said, holding up his canvas. It's not about being good, I said, dipping my brush in crimson. It's about feeling. Ben looked at me, his eyes searching. When Sophie ran off to chase a butterfly, he spoke, his voice low. Mom, I'm sorry. For the note, for the garage, for not seeing what Lauren was doing. I found more cards in her desk ones you sent Sophie. She hid them. The words were a stitch, mending a tear in my heart, but not closing it completely. I know you're sorry, I said, setting my brush down. But I needed you. Ben, I paid $45,000 to keep your house, and you let her push me out. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like Will's, it ached. I was blind. Lauren made it seem like you were holding us back, that the house was ours to sell. I believed her because it was easier than fighting. And now I asked, my voice steady. I'm done, he said, his jaw tightening. I moved out last week, to an apartment near work. I'm filing for divorce, but Lauren's threatening to limit my time with Sophie if I don't drop the lien. My heart clenched, but I kept my voice calm. She won't take Sophie, I said. The lien gives us leverage, and Brian's working on it. You don't have to choose between her and me. Ben's eyes glistened. How did Dad know to protect you like this? He always saw more than he let on. I said, touching his arm. He loved you. Ben, even when you were lost. He believed you'd find your way back. We sat in silence, the garden humming with bees. Sophie returned, holding a lavender sprig. "For you, Grandma," she said, tucking it behind my ear. I hugged her, my heart full. That evening, Ben stayed for dinner, spaghetti and meatballs. Sophie's request. We laughed over old stories, like the time Ben tried to fix Will's lawnmower and flooded the yard. For the first time in years, I felt like a mother, not a stranger. When they left, Sophie hugged me tight. "See you soon." "Grandma," she said, and Ben nodded, a promise in his eyes. Alone again. I walked to my painting table, the rose canvas half finished. I added a stroke of gold, catching the sunset's glow. The colours were bolder now. Like my heart, I thought of Lucy's words about therapy, of Will's faith in me. I'd lost so much Will, years of Ben's love. My home, but I was finding something new, a purpose, a voice, a life that was mine. A month later, I hung a painting at the Montford art walk, a watercolour of my roses at dusk, their thorns soft but present. Clara and Lucy cheered, their iced teas raised. To Ellie, Clara said, "For blooming where she's planted." I smiled, my heart light. The painting didn't sell, but it didn't need to. It was mine, a piece of me shared with the world. I sat in Clara's garden that night, a cup of chamomile tea in my hands, the stars bright above Asheville. I thought of Sophie's lavender, Ben's halting apology, the friends who'd become my family. Healing wasn't done, maybe never would be, but I was on my way. The roses I'd left behind waited for me, and I knew I'd return, stronger than before. The morning sun spilled into my Montford kitchen, casting a golden glow across the oak table where Will and I had shared countless mornings. I stood at the counter, arranging a bouquet of roses from my garden, their petals vibrant and soft, a quiet celebration of life reclaimed. The air was rich with the scent of freshly baked blueberry muffins, a recipe I'd tweaked for Sophie's visits. It was Mother's Day again, a year since that shattering moment when Lauren's note, "If you want to stay here." We have the garage had left my suitcases on the sidewalk. At 68, Ellie Harper Ellie, to those who'd loved me through a lifetime of joy and sorrow, had walked a long road since then, one of betrayal, defiance, and rediscovery. Today, my heart was light, filled not with the weight of sacrifice, but with the warmth of a home and family reborn. The doorbell chimed, a cheerful note that warmed me. I knew who it was before I opened the door. Grandma Sophie cried, her 7-year-old arms wrapping around me, her pigtails bouncing. Ben followed, holding a small wrapped box, his hazel eyes so like Will's soft with a peace I hadn't seen in years. Clara Thompson, my dearest friend, arrived last, her silver hair tucked under a scarf, a fruit tray in her hands. "Happy Mother's Day." "Mom," Ben said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "The house smells like heaven." "Blueberry muffins," I said, taking the box from him. "Sophie's favorite, but you'll steal a few, I bet." Clara laughed, setting the tray on the counter. "You're spoiling us, Ellie. I brought some strawberries to pretend it's healthy." Sophie tugged at my hand, her eyes bright. "Grandma, I made you something at school. Open it, Pin." "I can't wait, sweetheart," I said, my heart swelling. We moved to the living room, its walls now adorned with my watercolours roses, mountains, a sunset over the French Broad River, each one a step in my journey back to myself. Sophie flopped onto the sofa, pulling a folded paper from her backpack, a painting of our rose garden with stick figure versions of us, labelled Grandma, Daddy, me. Clara settled beside her, her arm around Sophie's shoulders, while Ben took the armchair, watching us with a quiet pride. So much had changed in a year. Ben and Lauren's marriage had collapsed under the weight of her greed, their dream of a Biltmore Forest mansion shattered by the equitable lien I'd placed on the house. They'd sold the Montford cottage back to me for the remaining mortgage balance, $151,000, a fraction of its worth, but enough to secure my home. Lauren had moved to Florida, chasing a new life with a new partner, her contact with Sophie limited to occasional calls. Ben had fought for primary custody, his apartment a cozy haven 3 blocks away, close enough for Sophie to bike over. Our relationship had healed slowly, stitched together through honest talks and shared meals. There were still scars, his silence at the garage, the years he'd let Lauren push me out, but we'd faced them, and that made us stronger. I unwrapped Ben's gift, my fingers careful with the ribbon. Inside was a framed sketch I'd drawn of Will and Ben fishing when Ben was 10, found in a box I'd left behind. The frame was simple oak, like our kitchen table, and a note was tucked inside. To Mom, for bringing us home, love, Ben. Tears pricked my eyes, and I hugged him tight. "It's perfect," I whispered. Clara helped me hang it beside the fireplace, next to Sophie's painting. "It's where it belongs," she said, her voice thick. Sophie and Clara headed to the garden, their laughter drifting through the open window as they chased a butterfly. I watched them, my heart full, and thought of how far we'd come. "Coffee?" I asked Ben. Moving to the kitchen, he followed, slicing strawberries for the fruit tray. "Sophie's loving school," he said, his voice casual but proud. "She's got your knack for painting." I smiled, pouring Folgers into mugs. "She's got your stubborn streak, too. Takes after both of us." Ben nodded, his eyes softening. "I found Dad's old fishing journal last month. In a box from the house. It's full of notes about us, you, me, Sophie. He wrote about the house, said it was your heart. He was right. I thought of Will's journal. Tucked in my nightstand, its pages a map of his love. I'd read it cover to cover, each entry a gift, his worries for Ben, his pride in me, his faith in our home. The last entry, written days before his cancer took him, stayed with me, Ellie, my love. You're the roots of this house. When I'm gone, you'll keep it standing. Trust Ben, he'll find his way, and he had. We finished preparing brunch, a quiche, fruit salad, and those blueberry muffins, a simple spread made rich by love. Before we ate, Ben raised his glass of orange juice. "To Mom," he said, his voice steady, "for holding us together, even when we didn't deserve it," Sophie and Clara echoed. To Grandma, their glasses clinking with warmth. I blinked back tears, raising my own, to family. I said, and we drank. The moment sweet as the muffins. After brunch, Sophie cleared the dishes, a chore Ben had taught her. While I stepped onto the porch, the spring air was soft, the rose garden a tapestry of colour. Clara would join me later for our book club, a circle of women who'd become my anchor. We'd supported each other through life shifts, Lucy's new gallery show, Susan's trip to Ireland, my own journey from exile to home. Their friendship showed me I wasn't alone, that roots could grow deep at any age. My paintings had blossomed too. Last month, I'd taught a kids' art class at the River Arts District, guiding young hands to paint roses and rivers. One of my watercolors, A Garden at Dawn, was chosen for the Asheville Art Festival, a small triumph that warmed me like sunlight. I'd sold another, a sketch of Montford's dogwoods, to a tourist from Raleigh, using the money for new brushes. The act of creating, of sharing, was reward enough. Inside, Sophie's giggle rang out, Ben's voice joining in, humming a James Taylor tune off-key. The sounds of family, rebuilt on respect, not obligation. 2 weeks ago, I'd received a letter from Lauren, postmarked from Florida. Her handwriting was careful, Ellie. I was wrong to push you out, My pride cost me everything, Ben. Sophie, the life I thought I wanted. I'm sorry, but I don't expect forgiveness. I'd read it once, then tucked it away. The apology was late, but it eased a knot I hadn't known was there. I had no wish to reconnect some wounds healed best apart, but I didn't carry anger anymore. Will had taught me to let go. Ben joined me on the porch, handing me a cup of chamomile tea. "You okay?" he asked, his voice simple but searching. I looked at him. My son who'd wandered but returned, stronger for it. He was learning, as I had, that love thrived with boundaries, with truth. "I'm more than okay." I said, truthful, "I'm home." We sat on the swing, its creak a familiar lullaby, the afternoon sun warming our faces. Sophie played in the garden, Clara chasing her with a playful roar, their laughter floating like petals on the breeze. Inside, my latest painting waited, a half-finished view of the mountains at twilight. Tomorrow, I'd add more color, more depth. Tomorrow, I'd keep building the life I'd reclaimed. Today, it was enough to be here, present, respected, loved not for what I gave, but for who I was. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If Ellie's story touched your heart, subscribe to my channel for more tales of love and resilience. Comment below with your city. I'd love to see where this story has reached.